I am the Senior Engineer of Signal Design and Signal Standards for Canadian National.
Tell me a bit about yourself and how you got into model railroading.
Oh, goodness. Well, I grew up in a little town. The railroad tracks were about a farmer's cornfield away from the house. And probably just from seeing trains growing up, I developed an interest in them. I got into modeling kind of with my first train set about age 6. It was a Lionel 027 gauge Rio Grande train with a Lupa track. I got my first HO scale train, a B&O F7, when I was 9, and I've kind of been hooked on HO ever since.
What inspired you to create your current model railroad?
Oh, good memories as a kid. Rail fan in this line with a friend, my mentor, Stuart Bostick, who actually worked for the CNO, retired as the supervisor of signals on this line. And we would spend hours going up and down the line, him explaining things and talking about, a lot of the signal projects he worked on back in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I think it was through those stories that he kind of instilled the legend of the CNO, if you will, into my mind. So you couple that with childhood memories of rail fanning this in the late Chessie, early CSX era. It was something I wanted to create in the form that the stories had taken, but yet I wasn't able to experience.
Could you describe your goal when you created your model railroad?
A time machine. I wanted things as accurate as possible. I wanted the scenes to look right. I wanted them to be historically accurate. And then ultimately to function just like the railroad would have in that time period. So not only the visual, part of it being historically accurate, but the recreation from an operational standpoint accurate. Kind of like a Civil War reenactment, mentality, if you will.
Yeah, and you've definitely created that. I feel me and all the other operators on your railroad definitely feel like we're stepping back in time every time we come here, and we enjoy our jobs when we come and operate. It's definitely a pleasure to be here.
Well, we appreciate you coming and taking time out of your Sundays to come play trains, and the few of the operators that were very much so involved in not only the building of the original layout, but the addition several years ago. A lot of long Saturdays getting us to where we're at. So definitely a team effort, and the railroad is only as enjoyable as the people who come to operate on it.
Very nice. What are your challenges you faced when building your layout? How did you overcome them?
Space is always a challenge. I really regret, in some respects, running the linear walls, the short length of the layout basement instead of the long length. But there were some concerns with aisle spacing due to some support beams down the center. Knowing what I know now, I think I probably could have made it work. So that's kind of, a regret. Challenges, many things were challenges, but looking back at it now, not any one particular thing sticks out other than maybe just the general challenge of finding my stride, if you will, with the scenery and a version of scenery that I could be happy with.
What is your favorite part of your layout?
The CTC machine.
Oh, I was thinking you were going to pick some scene somewhere downstairs that might have tied in somewhere, somehow special.
I enjoy Allegheny, although I wasn't able to model quite all of the things at Allegheny. It's a very good representation. The track plan is accurate, other than a couple switches that were omitted, but everything's, if you will, in chronological order as you would view it. The that's one of my more favorite scenes. Lynchburg has a few downtown industrial scenes that I really enjoy, but at the same time, some of the more simpler middle of nowhere scenes, such as the west end of Joshua Falls, I like that too. But if I was backed into a corner, I mean, my first love is the signal system, and I built the model railroad so that I would have a excuse to be able to build a model signal
So
system.
the scenery is just to keep everybody else happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a necessary evil in my mind.
If it wasn't for the scenery, you'd just have tracking signals.
Probably, but it's a necessary evil in my mind to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, which is the time machine scenario.
Yep. Yep. The time capsule. Okay. Is there a favorite locomotive or rolling stock on the layout?
I really like covered wagons. It's one of the reasons why I kind of had to cut my time period off where I did. 65 was kind of the last hurrah for covered wagons on the C&O. They were already shipping a lot of them over to the B&O by this point, but there was a few still bouncing around, although be it very rare in, ABA lash ups or anything like that. By the end of 65, they were all pretty much gone from the C&O, other than places where the C&O interchanged with the B&O, such as Cincinnati, Chicago. Although we're just about a year from the Interstate Commerce Commission approving the C&O takeover of B&O in 66, there was still a lot of operational integrating going on, if you will, in older power S2s, covered wagons. Were all getting moved over to the B&O that was extremely hungry for any power they could get their hands on. So the covered wagons definitely, and it influenced other decisions such as, how late can I push it to catch second generation diesels, but yet still have the covered wagons.
Okay. How do you approach doing your details on the layout and the more realism that you've added?
I don't know really how to answer that. I mean, I do a lot of stuff from photos. It's kind of just, if it's there, I should have it there. Whether it be a water spigot next to the yard office, or 3 cross arms on the pole line versus 2. If it's there and I can see that it's there in a photo, I generally figure out a way to put it on the layout, no matter how small of a detail. To me, that's kind of part of the time machine element of it, is the details really enriches that experience. So I don't go looking for things to super detail to just say, oh, I can make this better or add this super detail to this structure or this scene just to enrich it. I add them because I've seen it in photos, or I know that exists because it's been on a drawing, I just know that it was common practice for the C&O to do it this way or that way. So,
what would you say sets your layout aside from others and how it's operated and ran?
I think the truly integrated, if you will, 1960s operation. I mean, lots of people have signal systems. I'd like to think, because of what I do for a living, mine is probably more accurate than some. There certainly is a lot of great model railroads out there with a CTC system that are very accurate, but not very many people, really get into the whole. Good example is, in this hobby, it's either you're running signals or you're running timetable and train orders, or you're not really doing any form of operation. What people don't really realize is, the 40s, 50s, 60s, really through the 70s into the early 80s, when the railroads pretty much got away from timetable and train order, there's still a lot of elements of timetable and train order in a CTC railroad. You still get a clearance Form A to leave initial terminal. You still issue Form 19s in CTC territory, although be it not for movement, you're still getting Form 19s for certain conditions, such as slow orders. Some railroads, the Pennsylvania Railroad was a big employer of this. CNO did it in several sections along this line where they would only install centralized traffic control on double track in one direction. So west on the westbound, east on the eastbound. That was a cost-saving measure because 99.9% of the time trains are following the right-hand running philosophy. However, what happens when there's a tie gang or a rail gang out on the eastbound track? That means eastbounds have to operate on the westbound track. And there's no signal system in the westbound or eastbound direction on the westbound track. So how do they do that? They do that with a Form 19, what's called a right over order. So I think I have one of the few model railroads that actually tie that together of truly what the operations would have been like in the 50s and 60s. Getting the clearance Form A, cutting 19s for certain things, and then bringing that all together where it isn't just a signal system and we kind of function like we do today, mark up with the dispatcher, and when you get a green light, go. There was still a lot of paperwork in this era that trained crews had to contend with. There was still a formal process of putting you on the train sheet, cutting a clearance in the clearance book, issuing all that to an operator who would put the package together, staple that clearance with all the 19s. That might be 5 or 6 of them for different slow orders up and down the line, and providing that to a crew prior to departure. So I think that's a unique element of operating that kind of gives us a little bit of both worlds. I always enjoy when I think we're getting, a little weak on our train order skills to put the Sperry car or the rail gang out there on one of the main tracks and have to post orders to run stuff around it. So that's always fun.
Or some random rock slide or
random rock slides.
Yeah. Okay.
Or messages to the local to pick up cars that weren't on his switch list.
Yeah. And speaking of locals, they always seem to mess with the different directions of flow of traffic.
Always in the way. There's a reason the railroads got rid of them, as much as they could anyway.
Okay. And so how would you say technology played a role in the hobby when you were building the layout?
I think almost any modeler today that has sound in DCC looks back and go, there's just no way I would be in the hobby or do what I'm doing without that technology. Now, when you don't know that it exists, it's easy to, it's easy to say that. When I started this model railroad, DCC was available. I knew from the get-go I was going to do that, but sound really was a novelty. It wasn't very good. It really was kind of halfway through the major portion of construction that we really started to, equip the fleet with sound. And now, we moved from what I call DCC Phase 1, which was, plug-in throttles, maybe 50-50 sound and conventional sound decoders from many different manufacturers. So the quality was different to, we'll call this version 2.5 with the newer radio throttles. Everything having a sound decoder, decoder of the same manufacturer, Vequil, Lokes. I found that has eliminated a lot of the strange, I have no idea why it did this. DCC issues having one, manufacturer type of decoder on the railroad, and then Lokes allowing you to upload, custom files, if you will, allows us to kind of have the best quality sound file that we can find out there for the locomotive. So I could not imagine operating with a block system or non-sound locomotives. It's just one of those things. Once you move forward, you can't go back. I mean, none of us would probably ever go back to, you know, logs to heat our house and kerosene lanterns for light, since we've experienced electricity and DCC and sound and the technology that runs the signal system. I think all of that plays a role in it. Probably the most current piece of technology I think that's revolutionizing the hobby, and it really has nothing to do with electronics per se or how you operate your trains. It has more to do with how you build your railroad, is 3D printing. 3D printing is getting extremely, extremely sophisticated. The quality is really starting to get there, you know, where you can print flat sides for buildings or freight cars and not have to worry about print lines and things like that. It's the wave of the future, and I think you're going to see the hobby branch more, where you go online and you download a file for your 3D printer of the model you want and it prints it out, versus actually purchasing the model per se, particularly in the super detailing, locomotive details, small structures, novelty freight car portion of the hobby. So I think that's probably where technology is currently playing the biggest role in the hobby.
Good. Very good. What advice would you give to someone that is looking to build a model railroad? Besides, don't do it.
Well, I'd say start small, but most of us that are really big into the hobby, that's not an option. We want to just jump in full with both feet. In some respects, it's a young man's game. I think back and, you know, I'd work a full day, come home, work 5-6 hours on the model railroad, go to bed, repeat it all, you know, 12 hours on the weekends with a couple friends helping. I don't know that I could do that again and build one the size that we have here, you know, here at 40 some years old. But have a plan. No matter what size you're going to build, you know, a small little corner of the layout in the family room area, the entire basement, you know, a double deck railroad, it doesn't really matter. Have a plan and research your prototype, and make sure you feel good with that plan before you start building, because nothing will frustrate you faster than to have to rip out what you've already done. At the same time, don't get so bogged down with every last finite detail that it prevents you from starting your model railroad. There are certain things that can just wait until you're ready to do the scenery, or you're ready to start putting together the freight car fleet. But when it comes to the track plan in the towns, do I want a signal system? Do I not? Do I want to super elevate my curves? Do I not? You know, you really need to have that planned out before you start deciding on, you know, the width of your bench work and things like that.